Are you ready for Berserk chapter 182 to 186? Welcome to Manga Storian. This is the channel where we take some of your favorite manga and we give it a dramatic flair, allowing you to understand what happened in your favorite manga and allowing us to read it back to you and make some pretty awesome videos. Now in our last video for Berserk, Guts had returned to Godo's home with Casca to find Rickard speaking with Griffith. As the fury inside of Guts started to build up, Griffith said that he only came to see if he was truly free, to make sure that he had no regrets for what he has done. Guts attempted to attack Griffith, but Zod stood in his way. And once both Griffith and Zod had left, Guts once again left the home of Godo, this time with Casca. Across the lands in the western Midland Castle, under siege by the Kushan armies, the Kushan tear through, killing the men and soldiers, then burning the bodies of those dead and still alive. The women are chained together and they're guided out of the town in fear that they will either be killed or used to make more Kushan children. One of the women says that she has heard a rumor that the Kushan actually sacrifice women to their god. The women sigh, saying if only the men were still there. If the band of Hawks were around, none of this would have happened. A young girl in the group calls out that he's coming to save them at any moment. The Hawk of Light will come. She can hear it whispering in the wind. Elsewhere in the town, the Kushan general in charge of the attack sits, saying how their armies have taken out 6 of the enemy's forts, yet they cannot capture 1 man. He goes on saying how he's disgusted, and he asks how they can even call themselves warriors. Salat begins to explain how Griffith escaped on the back of Zod, and as he does, the general kicks Salat in the head. Salat remains unmoved by the kick, and the general goes on telling him, "You were once slaves, and to this, in any regard, is absurd." Without a word, Salat stands up and swings his arm forward at the general, stopping before his face can catch a bolt. As the tip of the bolt stops just before the general's mouth, Salat tells him that they have more pressing matters at hand. The two Tapasa, with Salat, quickly turn back to see the Midland soldiers who fired the bolt, and they brutally beat them to death. One soldier tries to run away, but before he can get far, one of Salat's bladed rings shoots by, and off comes the man's head. The general watches, asking, "How do you move so fast? How do you rip through steel with your bare hands?" Salat says that it's time for them to resume their search for the Hawks, and he begins to lead the Tapasa out. But suddenly Salat is stopped as his eyes widen. Before him is Griffith, as if he was radiating light, riding up on a white horse. The entire town falls silent seeing Griffith, and all Salat can do is stare. Griffith then calmly rides past Salat towards the general, and in a blink of an eye, a sword is stabbed through the general's eye. The general falls to his knees and then the ground, leaving everyone in awe at what they just saw. One of the Kushan soldiers tells the archers to take aim and fire, and as they release the arrows, Salat tells them all to wait. Just like a swarm, the arrows all shoot towards Griffith, but not one lands. Griffith does not move, and the soldiers ask how. Did he dodge all of those? One of the soldiers tells everyone that it was a fluke. Fire again! And as the soldiers pull back on their bows, everyone begins to hear something stampeding through the crowd. Before the soldiers can react, Zod rips through everyone, flinging body parts in every direction. The soldiers from before tell everyone that this man is of the Hawks. Kill him too. And as the Kushan soldiers arm themselves, Zod rides through, slicing through the entire crowd. While everyone watches Zod, a group of soldiers stand, all with a long lance through their heads, and then they all fall to their knees as it's removed. The knight walks through the crowd, lifting his visor, telling them all that his name is Locus, and he has sought out this ground under the guidance of an oracle. He sees the Hawk of Light. Griffith asks if he shall join his sword with his, and Locus pulls down his visor again, telling him, gladly. Zod and Locus then turn back to the Kushan soldiers, killing everyone within reach, and the young girl from before bites onto the rope on her wrist, stating, "It's him! It's him! It's Griffith! The wind whispered and the world has begun to change!" The young girl stares amazed at Griffith's beauty, but before she can say a word to him, the two Tapasa jump past. The young girl shouts to Griffith to look out, but in a flash, they are both struck in the stomach and knocked to their knees. They ask what just happened, and then a small black thing starts to grow, telling the two of them that they are slow and stupid. Are they really the best that there is? The mask appears and the Tapasa say that it is Roxas. He's supposed to be exiled. Roxas looks towards Griffith, telling him that he is the Hawk of Light. He is beautiful, and one day he shall cut off his head and make it his own. Griffith looks at Roxas and smiles, and Roxas stutters. Roxas then says that until that day, he shall let no harm come to him. The two Tapasa attack like a floating mist, and Roxas weaves in and out of the two Bakaraka's attacks. Suddenly off in the distance, everyone can hear the sounds of the gate being destroyed, and then a giant man walks out. The man stands holding a large hammer and shield, wearing an armor that looks like a dragon. The Kushan shout that he is alone, they can take him, and the giant man holds out his shield, shield, and through the shield's mouth it fires a blast, ripping through the crowd before him. As the fire stops, the giant man then takes his hammer and slices through the remaining soldiers standing in his way. The battle continues to rage on, and a small bird watches and then flies off. The bird flies down towards a young witch with green hair sitting in a tree, and the consciousness between the two switch back. The young witch thanks the bird's body as it flies off, and the elf sitting on the edge of her hat asks, "Why use the bird?" The young witch says that getting that close to that kind of a power in her astral body would be dangerous. One slip and she'd be lost in another world. She goes on stating that what she saw was the Hawk of Darkness. He is the one who shall bring true darkness to the world. Kushan blood stained the grounds red, and the setting sun shines down, turning everything else to a shade of red. Even though it would be a ghastly sight, it looks like it's a painting. Elsewhere, as the night falls, Farnese and Serpico huddle by a fire in a destroyed house in an attempt to escape the snow around them. Serpico mentions that it's actually kind of nice not having anyone else with them and for them to finally be on their own. Farnese comments that everything he just said was nonsense. She's cold and hungry. Serpico asks if they just forgot about the Black Swordsman, and Farnese tells him that she has no such intention. She has no desire to go back and see that room again. Serpico remains quiet, and Farnese asks why doesn't he come closer to the fire, and he says that it's fine. He shall sit here just in case the Kushan army scouts come. As Serpico turns back, he remembers that it was snowing like this when him and Farnese first met. He was younger and poor, and he would get food for him and his mother when one day a group of kids beat him up to take his food. Serpico answered by beating back the one who hit him with a rock, and after taking back the food, he returned home where his mother was sickly, barely skin and bones. As Serpico would rub her back, his mother noticed the bruise on the child before and slapped him, telling him that he is of noble blood. He shouldn't lower himself to those beneath him. She went on telling him how one day his noble father will return and come for them, and until that day comes, he is to keep this locket. As his mother went on, Serpico knew that if what she was saying was true, he was just a nobleman's bastard son. Later, after going back outside, the boy he hit with a rock returned with his older brother. The group of kids beat Serpico to an inch of his life, and so Serpico was just laid there, letting the snow cover him. The coldness somehow felt nice, and then he heard the voice of a young girl. As he looked up, he knew what they were. They were nobles, people that he was supposed to be. He looked at the noble's daughter and he told her that her doll looked weird, and the girl stepped on his head yelling at him. But then she looked down on him, and she told the others with her to load the child into the cart. They will be taking him home with them. The young Farnese then cared for Serpico and told him that for saving his life, he would now belong to her. Afterwards, Serpico told his mother what happened and how the noble family even employed him. So with the wages that he'll be making, he can have a nurse take care of her. But as time went on, Serpico spent time with Farnese, and he found that he was more of a plaything for her, and even the other servants didn't care for her. However, one night there was a storm outside, and Farnese ordered him to stand by her bed and hold her hand through the night. As the winds began to pick up, the lightning struck, and she demanded that Serpico do something to stop that lightning. He tried to say that there was nothing that he could do, but before he could finish, a branch came crashing through the window. Farnese jumped out of her bed and ran outside, but as Serpico followed, he found Farnese outside, dancing in the rain. It was like she was possessed, and as she spun around and destroyed the stone sculptures, she shouted that she could be a storm too. Time passed, and one day Serpico followed Farnese into the woods where he saw the bones of small animals scattered about. She placed a cage with a bird in it and said that the bird has not grown to love her, so she lit the cage on fire. She looked back smiling, saying that this was her crematory, where she burns all of the things that are bad. Serpico had heard from the other servants that Farnese liked fire, even to the point where she was the one who threw the torch into the burning heretics. And one day, Farnese's father, the master of the home, returned from a trip and saw Farnese holding the rabbit doll. He told her to throw it away. She has much newer toys to play with, and Farnese said yes, she will. Serpico remembered that some of the servants said how on one family trip, Farnese begged her father to buy that doll for her, and that it meant a lot to her, so Farnese took the doll and burned it. The following day, while walking in the halls, Farnese's father stopped Serpico asking what was around his neck. He handed the locket over, thinking that maybe the master thought he stole it, and as he looked at it, the master said, "I thought so." Inside the locket was a picture of his mother and father in their youth, and right now he was meeting his father, the noble that his mother spoke of, which would mean that Farnese was actually his half-sister. Farnese's father, who is now actually Serpico's father, explained that his 3 half-brothers were already fighting over who would succeed the family business, and he can't afford to let his presence be known. So as long as he keeps this all a secret, Serpico would be given a noble rank. Serpico accepted his father's conditions in hopes of continuing to live in the mansion, and his father told him that he had heard from the others that he had seen being with Farnese as a godsend. Would he like to continue watching over her? Years would begin to pass, and Farnese and Serpico grew up together, with Serpico never leaving Farnese's side. Through her teens, Farnese would attend parties and balls, having Serpico only dance with her to make the other men jealous. So much so that when the other men would speak ill, she would challenge them to a duel, with Serpico fighting for her. Serpico would win these duels, but would often not put all of his effort into it, causing himself to get injured in the process. Farnese noticed this and then would whip him for holding back, even though Serpico would say that she was thinking too highly of him. One day as she whipped him, she looked at his scars and then bit down on his arm, drawing blood. As she licked the blood off of her lips, Serpico knew that in some warped fashion, Farnese saw the relationship between them as more than just master and servant. With the years going on, his sickly mother eventually passed, and she no longer even recognized him. Whenever Serpico would go to visit, his mother would only see him as his father, thanking him for finally coming back to her. Once Farnese and Serpico's father returned after a several-year absence, he told Farnese that he had planned a marriage for her. Her groom was that of a royal family, and though he knows of what has happened at the past parties, he has agreed to marry her. This would be something for their family. The Van Dominions would greatly benefit from. Farnese, never disagreeing with her father, told him yes, she will do it. However, afterwards, she left for the woods and Serpico chased after. Once Serpico caught up, he found Farnese standing there, having removed all of her garments. Before Serpico could say a word, Farnese threw herself onto him, telling him that she can't leave their home. She doesn't want to be anywhere else but here. As she blushed, she looked up, saying that she won't be going anywhere unless he would run away with her. Farnese's hands grabbed onto Serpico's, and Serpico remained silent, and then he pulled his hands back and he pushed Farnese away. She said nothing as she grabbed her clothes and ran back home crying. Serpico watched as Farnese ran away, his half-sister just confessing her feelings for him, and he rejected her. He soon returned to the mansion to hear the screams and sounds of the servants shouting that Farnese has gone mad. She took a candle and began to set the home on fire. As the fire spread, Serpico saw a chandelier hanging above her, and it looked like it was ready to fall. He rushed in, tackling her to the ground, just moments after the chandelier crashed in that location. Then after the fire, their father called off the marriage and sent Farnese to the monastery, not wanting to deal with her anymore. Serpico, though, was sent by special arrangement of her father to watch over her. It was from that day that their relationship had returned back to master and servant, and as the time was spent at the monastery and the talks of the Van Dominion name spread, and soon Farnese was selected to lead the Knights of the Holy Iron Chain. The Holy Iron Chain had a tradition of being led by a female, and Farnese's family name had ensured her place. Farnese led the knights as they were sent to gather heretics and burn them at the stake, and she did so with unwavering faith in God. One night during the burning, Serpico noticed that Farnese looked like they all looked when they were children, and figured perhaps maybe she had finally found her place in the world. As time passed, he saw that the heretics that were being burned were more than just common folk who believed that wealth should be passed around, but poor common folk like he was. However, in fear of their status and power, the church would burn those people, not just them, but their entire families. Serpico, though, feeling sorry for those who were in his position, just stood and watched until Serpico saw the last person that he expected to see at the stake, his mother. She hadn't passed. She had grown more and more sickly as time went on. He looked at her and he quietly called out, "Mother," to which Farnese overheard. His mind began to race, thinking of how and why she would even be up there, and then the priest started to ask if he really just said that his mother was up there. Answering, Farnese shouted, "Of course not. No member of the Holy Iron Chain could be tainted with heresy." As Serpico's mother saw him, she called out to him, still thinking that it was her long-lost lover finally returning to her. Serpico thought that he had prayed for her death so that he could finally free himself, and here she was standing before him. He watched as Farnese held out the torch, telling Serpico to light her. He looked back to see Farnese almost crying, telling him to show them proof that this woman is not his mother. He must swear it to her again, that she is his master, up until now, and from now on. He took the torch. Together he and Farnese set the fire. It had been 3 years since that day, and now they were both away from the maze that they both thought that they would be in forever. Now Farnese chases after the Black Swordsman as if he were a fire that can melt away all of the snow. And on that snow, all the two of them leave are their footprints moving closer to that flame. And that concludes Berserk Chapter 182 and 186. We finally learned a little bit more about Serpico. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to get your Berserk every Friday. You can also get One Punch Man, Attack on Titan, Dead Man Wonderland, Bleach, and various other manga if you stick around. Don't forget we also are on Twitter at Mangastorian, and I'll see you next time right here.